Now that we have a grasp on the basics of Amazon VPC, let's take a moment to look at how everything looks in the AWS dashboard. So to do that, we'll click on Services as always, and then find VPC. On the VPC dashboard, you'll have a bunch of options that we're going to navigate in a moment on the left side of the page, but for now, I want to focus on the dashboard itself. So for every VPC resource, you'll have a section here where you can view all the resources in all the regions. For example, if we want to see VPCs in all regions, let's just click here, and we can see that because this is a new account, there's one default VPC in every region in this account. Now recall that subnets in a default VPC are deployed into every availability zone in a region. So if we click on See All Regions for subnets, we expect to see more than one subnet per region. And that is the case. US East has the most, but there are multiple subnets, therefore multiple availability zones in each region. Just like we saw in the diagrams in a previous video, every VPC has only one default route table, and it's a route table that includes a route for local traffic and a route for the internet gateway. And that's exactly what we see here, one route table per region. And I definitely encourage you to take some time and give this dashboard a lot of attention because it has a lot of really useful information, and VPC is almost certainly where you're going to spend a lot of your time in AWS in your career. That being said, before we move on, I do want to point out one more thing. Now, because all subnets in a default VPC are public subnets, we don't have any default NAT gateways. And that's because, recall, a public subnet has an association with an internet gateway. And an internet gateway provides both internet routing and NAT services. With that being said, let's check out some of the different parts of VPC in the dashboard, and we'll start with your VPCs. And just like we expect, we only have the one default VPC for now. In fact, if you look on the right side of the page, you'll see that it's flagged as the default VPC. Now, there are a couple of things down here that I'd like to point out very quickly, and one is that the VPC is associated with one main route table that we'll get to in a moment. And two, there's something called a network ACL, which controls security roles for a VPC, and we're going to cover this in a lot more detail in another video. For now, let's move on to subnets. And once more, because there's one subnet for each availability zone in a region, and because North Virginia has 6 availability zones, we expect to see 6 subnets, and that's exactly what we see. Let's check out one of these subnets in a little bit more detail. You'll notice right off the bat that it's associated with our main VPC. And then another thing to point out is that you can view the route table either by clicking the link here or by clicking the route table tab here. And because this is a public subnet, we see the one route that directs traffic locally, but if we scroll down, we also expect to see a route for an internet gateway, and that's exactly what we see here. Let's move on to route tables, and of course we expect to see only one. In fact, it is the main route table for this VPC. If we click on routes, we expect to see 2, and those are the 2 routes that we just saw in the route tables tab in the subnets page. We can also see by clicking on the Subnet Associations tab that the main route table for the default VPC is by default associated with every subnet in the VPC. Of course, we expect to see one internet gateway here, and that's what provides internet routability to our public subnets. And I definitely encourage you to spend some time looking through the rest of your VPC options. VPN connections is going to be beyond the scope of this video, but we are going to talk about security, and in particular, network ACLs and security groups in another video. And that wraps it up for an overview on how VPC components look in your AWS dashboard. So if all of that makes sense, feel free to move on.